Well, joining me now to talk more about the security threat is Raymond Tanter. He's a professor and a visiting fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thanks for joining us. Well, as we've been reporting, most U.S. embassies will now reopen, or they've already reopened on Saturday. Is that because the U.S. now thinks that the terror threat is over or significantly lessened?
Well, Anand, when I served at the White House in the Reagan-Bush days, we had three criteria in mind in developing what we call a threat matrix. The threat had to be imminent, credible, and corroborated. And if one of these is missing, then we probably wouldn't recommend taking such a drastic step as closing embassies. So I suspect that the threats are no longer imminent at the places that were reopened.
Right, I ask that because it's a little bit puzzling, because the United States seems to be operating on its timetable here. We think the threat is happening right now, so we close the embassy. We think the threat is over, so we reopen the embassy. But the guys who want to attack the United States might not be working according to that timetable.
Well, there are all kinds of dates that the Islamists have in mind. This was the anniversary of the operation that pushed Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, and the story behind that story is that Saudi Arabia became much more dependent on American air forces, air protection, and therefore that upset the Islamists. But the most important story is the past. The legacy of the Iranian Revolution of 1979 began this whole process of showing the Islamists that they could threaten American embassies. You remember the takeover of the American embassy in Tehran? That taught the Islamists all over the world that embassies are soft targets, they're vulnerable. And all of a sudden you had the Islamist takeover of Iran itself. There was a Mujahideen takeover from the Shah of Iran, but the Islamists under Khomeini took over that one.
Also now, given the security that is maintained in the United States, the embassy has become a soft target, as you point out. It's also a very symbolic target to attack the United States in that way. I'm going to ask you something else, and that is the closing of these diplomatic posts appears to have caused controversy here in America. I mean, questions are being asked whether did the United States overreact by doing this? Did it, as some have been suggesting, make the United States look weak and hand a propaganda victory to Al-Qaeda?
Yeah, I think that you could say there was a propaganda victory for sure, because if you look at the Islamist websites, they're claiming victory. On the other hand, Peter King, representative Republican of New York, and various other members of Congress on the Republican side have not criticized the president. They have not said this made, the ones who know, the ones who have seen the intelligence are the ones who support the particular decision to close and reopen the embassy.
Right. We did have a congressman from Texas there who said that, well, he went as far as saying that this closure made the United States look like a bunch of cowards.
He's not on the Intelligence Committee. Right. Those who know don't say, and those who say don't know.
Okay. But is there a danger here that Al-Qaeda, or any other group for that matter, could now engage in a campaign of disinformation and propaganda, putting out false threats? You know, they feel we've got the switch right now. We can turn it on and off as we please.
I spoke with a member of the American intelligence community before this show came on air, and he said that's a danger, but we think we deterred an American strike. We would rather trade off the fact that Al-Qaeda could try to give us disinformation, in return for which we protected our people. And that was a big trade-off.
So it's preferable to being overcautious, in other words.
Well, especially after Benghazi.
Well, I was just going to ask you about Benghazi, yeah.
You cannot allow another Benghazi, not just on political grounds. Ambassador Chris Stevens was an honorable man. He was there in Benghazi. Of course, there was probably a CIA installation very close to him, and the CIA was probably running arms to Syria from Qatar, and the United States gave its green light to do this. This is what the CIA, this is what every intelligence agency does.
Well, you're right. The ambassador was not a politician, he was a diplomat, but it became a political issue here in Washington.
Yes, quite rightly so. It was a political issue, and through this discussion, we will have a better sense of security for American diplomats abroad.
Yeah, but wasn't part of the decision to shut down the embassies right now taken because of that?
I don't think so. I think that Benghazi was the subtext of shutting down some of the embassies, but most of the embassies, if you look at the map, most of the embassies are in the Persian Gulf area. And the ones in North Africa mostly are not shut down.
But Is this going to become a fact of life now? Are we going to see embassies being shut down, consulates shut down, the American diplomatic work being disturbed from time to time because of threats?
I don't think so. I think that our intelligence will get better and better in deciding what's disinformation on one hand and what is not. If I knew this particular intelligence, I would be thoroughly convinced, as Peter King was, as Congressman who's head of the House Intelligence Committee from Michigan was, and therefore these are the people I listen to.
Going to have to leave it there. Raymond Tanter, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.